All right, Mrs. Robertson, would you please poll the jurors?
You can hear the cries in the background from members of the Brown family.
As to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 2, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 3, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 4, as to count 1, is this your verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 5, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 6, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 7, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 8, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 9, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 10, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 11, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 12, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Okay, count 2. Juror number 1, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 2, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Juror number 3, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Juror number 4, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 5, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Juror number 6, as to count 2, is this your verdict?
Jubilation and relief on the faces of the defense team, of course, as the verdict is read out and as the jury is polled individually here to confirm that this is the verdict
Juror number
rendered.
10, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Juror number 11, as to
Ronald
count 2,
Goldman's
is this
father.
your verdict? Juror number 12, as to count 2, is
Very,
this your
very
verdict?
upset by this verdict.
All right, the clerk is directed to record the verdicts as read. The parties agree to waive reading of the verdicts as recorded. Mr. Cochran,
Mrs. Simpson,
do you waive
relieved,
reading of the
happy the
verdicts as
Simpson family there
recorded?
on the center of the screen.
Ms. Clark, thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to at this time take this opportunity to publicly thank you for the service that you've given to us. The burdens that we've placed upon you were enormous, and words can't begin to express the debt that we owe to you for the time and patience and exertion that you've given to us during the course of this case. I will have an opportunity to meet with you privately later, and I'll give you my private comments when we have a chance to meet. I want to caution you at this time that there is, as you know, intense media interest in this case. The news media will probably seek you out at your home or at your place of business. And I would implore that the news media act responsibly to avoid harassing you or identifying you without your consent or otherwise causing you concern. Whether you wish to cooperate with the news media is, of course, entirely up to you. However, I must warn you to expect the worst as far as that is concerned. We want to, I know I share with you in expressing our thanks to the bailiffs from the Sheriff's Department, to our court reporters, Ms. Foxham and Ms. Olson, to the research attorney, John Byrne, who's assisted us, our Pepperdine law clerks, Mr. Golub and Ms. Carswell, our media liaison, Jerry Ann Hazlett and her staff, and of course the jury commissioner, Gloria Gomez, and her staff. All right, counsel, is there anything we need to take up before we excuse the jurors? Mr. Cochran?
Johnny Cochran with a final address, possibly to the judge, the defense team of Johnny Cochran, Barry Scheck, Robert Shapiro, F. Lee Bailey, Carl Douglas, Alan Dershowitz, and 5 others there, the dream team as they call it, and as the cameras pan the courtroom. We've seen O.J. Simpson's mother relieved, the defense team jubilant, the Goldman family absolutely crushed by this verdict, because those of you who have been following the trial realize that Mr. Goldman has on several occasions...
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I am now going to excuse you from further service on this case. As you know, this does absolve you from your vows of silence. You may take with you your juror notebooks as you have requested, and we'll be chatting with you shortly. All right, thank you very much, and I'll see you all later. All right.
So the jury is free. O.J. Simpson is free. He can actually get up and walk out freely if he wishes to. He could, if he so chose, address the media outside. It's entirely up to him at this stage, although there was speculation this morning that he would probably return to the jail, pick up his belongings, and get away on a vacation as quickly as possible. F. Lee Bailey said yesterday that it was likely that Simpson and Bailey was absolutely certain of this acquittal. He said Simpson would begin to look for a house. That would be the first thing he'd be up to today. So they're seated again. We'll just tune in to see what's happening next.
All right, Ms. Clark, Mr. Cochran, anything else we need to take up? Ms. Clark? All right, the defendant having been acquitted of both charges, he is ordered transported to an appropriate sheriff's facility and released forthwith.
So
All right,
there
we'll
it
stand
is.
at recess.
Transported to a facility and released forthwith. So O.J. Simpson will be totally free in a couple of hours. Remarkably little emotion from the defense team. There was a moment of jubilation when the verdict was read out. Well, Jack London, there it is. Jack, there was a lot of speculation, of course, shifting in the other direction, that it would be a guilty verdict as a result of the testimony that the jury asked to be read out yesterday, which was the testimony of the limousine driver, Alan Park, which was highly critical of Simpson and could be seen as being on the side of the defense. Well, as you answer that, Jack, I'll just note for our audience that we are looking at pictures outside the courtroom. It's very, very calm, large crowd, a couple of thousand people, very controlled situation. L.A. at this time, just after the verdict, looks to be quite quiescent. Go ahead, Jack.
Lloyd, the problem with this case from all of our points of view outside of that courtroom all the way through has been that we have been biased and prejudiced and put into the middle of all sorts of things that the jury never went through. It looks like, for the jury, it was a pretty simple case without all of the hype that went on television. And that pretty simple case probably means that there was in addition to a mountain of evidence against O.J. Simpson, to quote Marcia Clark, there was a mountain of reasonable doubt. And that was because of the very effective manner in which the defense put in their case over a period of a year.
Jack,
So
let's just underline that very point, because that's all that has to be cast in this kind of situation. Am I correct? Reasonable doubt. And that there was enough reasonable doubt cast over that 9 months of testimony in the minds of the jury to acquit O.J. Simpson.
Absolutely, and subject to the comment about wealth being able to purchase that kind of defense, which is something we should talk about, that's the wonderful beauty of democracy, that no one can be found guilty in the United States or in Canada or in the Western world for that matter, unless the state is able to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt, and there is the barricade against intolerance and autocracy. We should all be thankful for that, whatever our personal feelings might be about whether or not O.J. Simpson is or is not guilty, because the fundamental principle of democracy is and always has been that better that 9 guilty people should walk the streets than that 1 innocent person should be convicted, and we've structured our system in order to prevent that from happening.
Jack, there'll be a lot of discussion over the next few days on just what turned this verdict in the decision in the direction of the defense. Can you think of any one thing that may have done it over the last 9 months?
Oh, I don't think it's going to be any one thing. I think it's going to be a large number of things. The constant being able to break down evidence to show the contamination, the racism of Furman surely has to have played a part. But ultimately, they called for that one piece of testimony, Alan Park's testimony, as you said, Lloyd, yesterday. People thought they wanted it because it seemed inculpatory, but my guess is that there was something in what Alan Park said, either that confirmed the suspicions of the jurors that there was reasonable doubt, or in fact led them to think that this was not Simpson who had done it. And I suspect we're going to find that there's 1 or 2 words that Park used, or 1 or 2 sentences that Park used, which was the final blow for those on the jury who were reluctant to acquit. The fact of the matter is, you can't possibly have had a verdict coming in that quickly unless they were very certain prior to walking into that courtroom that they were going to acquit and that there was a reasonable doubt. Not to say he didn't do it, only to say there was a reasonable doubt whether he did it.
Would they have talked amongst themselves on several occasions? Would they have reviewed testimony many times during the course of the period they were together?
They're not supposed to have. Every day, Judge Ito would say to them, don't deliberate on this, don't talk about this, don't form any opinions. But that's one of those instructions that goes on in a courtroom, I think, in vain, because human nature over 9 months means that you're going to form some opinions. and you're probably going to have some discussion. What will be interesting as the years go by and the books are written is to find out how much leakage there was into the jury room from the outside coverage, and how effective the strategy of playing to the cameras was for both sides.
I'm sorry, Jack, you said how important the cameras in the courtroom were for both sides?
Yeah, in the sense that, I suspect we're going to find out that there was a certain amount of information that was getting into that jury room,
right.
Because the lawyers were clearly playing to the cameras throughout the whole of the proceeding. It will be interesting as we find out from the jurors just how much additional, if any, information was brought into that jury room. Though I have to tell you that because it's an acquittal, and because the defense is not going to be the team that
Thanks,
goes
Jack.
after those.
Well, just hang on. We're going to cut to pictures from ABC right now to look at the scene outside the courtroom. This is KABC in Los Angeles, actually. We've got them on the line here. We understand that there was a loud cheer outside the courtroom when the verdict was read out, not guilty of murder for O.J. Simpson. And this is the kind of scene that's erupting now. So it's a joyous one. One would think that it's difficult to forecast what's going to happen in L.A., but if this is any indication of what the next few hours are going to be like, there will be no problems tonight. The L.A. police, even though they are in a high alert status, will not have much difficulty controlling any crowds around the courthouse or downtown Los Angeles tonight. Cynthia McFadden is discussing the case. She has covered it on a regular basis for ABC News. Let's listen into what she has to say.
Sobbing, Mrs. Brown looking straight ahead. When O.J. Simpson was brought into the courtroom, I don't know if you could see this on camera, Peter, he gave a big smile to his family sitting in the front row and then raised his eyebrows as a sort of, you know, it's going to be okay. He sat down, looked at the jury, Johnny Cochran holding his arm as the verdict was actually read. The jurors impassive throughout. The jurors had no expression on their faces as these verdicts were read, and then when they were polled, again, no visible expression whatsoever.
Okay, Cynthia, thank you. We'll come back to you in just a minute. There's certainly going to be...
Well, as Cynthia McFadden said yesterday, the smarties were all wrong about this one because they said it would take a very long time, that quite possibly 2 or 3 weeks before the jury would read a verdict, and then they also felt that there could be a hung jury, a very good possibility of that. Jack, it's interesting to look back on that speculation today in hindsight and ask just what really did go wrong here. Why were all of these so-called experts so wrong about the length of time it would take to reach a verdict?
Well, again, Lloyd, I think primarily it's because we, the experts, the outside observers, were measuring this according to the television coverage and the distortion that the television coverage brought to the trial, because we were hearing people speculating back and forth on theories and on evidence that never went to the jury.
Exactly. Peter Aronello, who has been with us on our newscast from time to time, talking about this particular case, is on the line. Let's listen to him.
Death where the burden of proof is less by a preponderance of the evidence and the composition of the jury might be different. Second point, I think this...
Peter, let me stop you just for a second
Sure.
there. Sorry. The civil suit, however, doesn't involve anything except money, and in one case he's been sued for $50 million, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's absolutely correct. It just involves money.
Okay, sorry, go on.
The second point is the speed of this acquittal is stunning. This is a trial that took 9 months, and for the jury to deliberate for as short a time as it did indicates, I think, very clearly that these jurors individually all made up their minds a long time before closing argument. And as to what motivated them, Bob Filibustine is right. Until we hear from jurors, we can only guess. But I think it's impossible to believe, given the mountain of physical evidence involved implicating O.J. Simpson, that any explanation for reasonable doubt could be separated from Mark Fuhrman. Mark Fuhrman was the villain of the defense's story. Without Mark Fuhrman as the villain, I wonder whether or not reasonable doubt could have been sown so well as to the gloves not fitting, as to cross-contamination at those labs. I think really Mark Fuhrman played a very central role in this case, as well as the socks.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter Aronell. We'll come back to you again in a while. A reminder, of course, that in many of the cases, we've been reminded of this several times in the last days, juries in at least 50% of cases, studies have shown, have made their minds up before actual closing arguments are made. Well, Barbara Walters is with us again from Los Angeles, and she has been sitting with Cato Kalin waiting for this verdict to be handed down. Barbara?
Peter, Cato, as I looked at you and we were listening together, you were clenching your hands, you looked pained, your eyes were closed. Now you tell me what was going through your mind when you heard the verdict.
What was going on in my mind was when they showed the camera shots of the families, and I think it's just so very difficult to be on any side of the family, and it's the verdict of how it came out was the way the justice system is here. And I know that I mentioned before, the 5 days of testimony here, and I was a little piece of this big hole that they're doing to fill. And
let me ask you something. You did tell me when we did an interview that you had come to an opinion from your own experience. Was your opinion the same as the jury's?
I think on this day that my opinion, it doesn't really matter on my opinion.
I didn't expect you to answer me. I just thought I had to ask. How do you feel about the verdict? How do you feel for O.J. Simpson, who was and perhaps still is your friend?
I feel terrible with this verdict that the Brown family does not have Nicole, and the Goldmans do not have Ron. And I thought with the verdict, no matter what, they're not going to be coming back. And it's a very mixed feeling. It's just very shaking because I think people see this sometimes as a soap opera, and it was with people that I knew and that I cared about, and it was a part of my life. And
Cato, this is very interesting. Your concern, and many of us, many people, perhaps not many of us, feel, the same concern, and certainly we are heartbroken when we look at the heartbreak of some of the family. But you haven't said anything about O.J. Simpson. Are you happy for him? Do you have no feelings about him?
I think the feelings that I have are that the justice system came with their decision, and the 12 made their decision.
But mostly you're concerned about the families and about Nicole.
That they're missing forever, yes.
There are some who felt that you were lying or dissembling when you were on the stand to help to protect O.J. Simpson.
Right. Well, that is so untrue, because I had met with the defense, with the prosecution. I was up with the best prosecution team in the world, the best defense lawyers in the world, and they had me at their disposal.
So you said
anytime they
everything you had
wanted
to
me,
say.
they would have brought me back. I was willing to do anything for them, and I met with them, both sides.
Will you make any effort now to be in touch with O.J. Simpson? He was your friend. Will he be your friend again?
I think I'm going to wait to see where the feelings go with O.J. asking about me, or right now I'm just going to live this moment, and I can't answer for the next day in my life.
And you're off to do your own radio show. You now have a daily radio show. Will you be talking about this, or will it be a whole other theme?
No, it'll be court-related, yes.
You will talk about it?
I think it'll have to be, and I'm sure when they call on our station, 97.1, people will be calling at all time.
Thank you, Cato. We've been with you many times before, and we thank you for coming on today and being with us. And Peter, we're going to have Robert Shapiro.
All right, that was Barbara Walters with Cato Kalin, one of the key players so far as star witnesses were concerned in this particular trial. O.J. Simpson, again, not guilty. He is now being sent back to the place where his belongings are kept. He will be released later in the day. That's going to be, from what I understand, a process that can take anywhere from 30 minutes to 4 hours, but the shorter time frame is expected today. We're going to take a very brief break right now, and we'll be right back with more coverage of the O.J. Simpson verdict after this.
Okay, everyone, this is our great new taste at McDonald's, and we need a name for it. It's got a new bakery-style roll, 2 leaves of lettuce,
Bakery homestyle
onions,
burger.
peppered bacon, tomato,
Supremo.
processed cheese,
Supremo with cheese.
ketchup, tangy sauce,
Arch.
and a quarter-pound meat patty.
Arches.
Daryl?
The new Arch Deluxe?
Yeah.
I was going to say that.
Me too. So obvious.
The new Arch Deluxe with bacon. October's taste of the month at McDonald's.
Back with our coverage of the O.J. Simpson verdict from Los Angeles. We are joining ABC News, and ABC, of course, Peter Jennings is anchor, has an entire team that has been covering this trial for many, many months. Cynthia McFadden is the main court reporter, the legal correspondent out of Los Angeles. So we're watching them, or with them, but we're also going to be keeping a very close eye on what is called the Unimike phase of this day, when some members of the defense team, possibly the prosecution team, the dejected prosecution team, in the person possibly of Marcy Clark or Mr. Darden, will come out and speak to reporters on microphones out front of the courthouse. That hasn't happened yet, but that's a possibility in a very short time. So let's go back now to ABC.
I believe the juries do make the right decisions ultimately.
Mr. Brown, it was indeed very precise what you said about the sovereign, and if the sovereign is corrupt, then there's some reason to judge otherwise. Can I ask you, though, to indulge us now and look at the trial in retrospect? Did you think he was guilty?
I thought there was a reasonable doubt generated by the inefficiencies and the corruptions of that prosecuting authority and those police officers involved. And I think that human liberty is so valuable. I mean, I've taken verdicts standing next to people, and in most cases they're acquitted, but I've had a few that were led away in handcuffs. That's such a profound experience that you know if there's a reasonable doubt, we cannot countenance deprivation of liberty. My view was that there was a reasonable doubt. There was some evidence that pointed at him. You had to have some suspicions, but there was a reasonable doubt in my mind.
Okay, thank you very much. Please stay with us. Cynthia McFadden, who's now outside the courthouse. Cynthia, you worked for Court TV before you came to us. You probably know as many lawyers as anybody in the country. How do you think the legal profession has fared as a result of all this? I may be a bit early to ask you that question.
I'm not sure, Peter. I'm not sure how well any of us have fared, if there are any heroes to come out of this one. It's going to take me a few days to be able to sort of come off the experience itself. I think that, as they say in Washington, everything is going to be on the table, though. I think there are a lot of people who feel that there need to be a lot of reforms in the way the system works. Everything from how many lawyers you can have sitting next to you in the courtroom on either side, to whether or not unanimous verdicts are a good idea. Certainly that wouldn't have made a difference in this case. But I think there are a lot of people who are very concerned about issues, sequestration among them, and cameras in the courtroom, frankly. I think that we may be seeing a moment when there are going to be many who reconsider the whole idea of cameras.
Okay. It may not be peculiarly American. In fact, it's not peculiarly American at all, but it was interesting to note this morning that one of the most famous trials overseas, the former Italian Prime Minister, Giulio Andreotti, who's on trial for associating with the mafia over the time he was Prime Minister of Italy 7 times. They have decided not to put this trial on Italian television, where they like everything on television, because they've seen the results, in their view, of the O.J. Simpson on trial. Cynthia, the prosecution's going to give a news conference in just a second. This is a question for you as a reporter rather than a legal analyst here now. This is a very major loss for the prosecution in department terms and in political terms. Am I correct?
You're certainly correct, Peter. The LA prosecutor's office, the DA's office out here, has a very strong track record when it comes to the run-of-the-mill case. I mean, they get convictions in almost 90% of their cases when they go to trial, and of course about 90% of the total number of cases settle before they even go to trial. The problem is with high-profile cases, and they have had a whole string of high-profile cases in the last several years, including the Menendez trial, where the jury hung, of course the first Rodney King trial, a whole string of cases where high-profile trials, they haven't been able to bring in a conviction. And so this is a real political issue for the DA, who's head of the office, Gil Garcetti. I can tell you from the courtroom, Peter, I don't know if you could see this on camera, Marcia Clark and Christopher Darden essentially looking straight ahead throughout. Several points, Mr. Simpson looked over at the prosecutors after the verdict had been read, and one of my colleagues sitting on the same bench as me said he was sneering. I'm not sure about that, but he certainly was giving them a look that said, you were wrong and I wasn't. I can also tell you that on the way out of the courtroom, Peter, Fred Goldman, the father, of course, of Ronald Goldman, walked by the area where the Simpson family was sitting and is on his way out of the courtroom, said loudly enough for us to hear it on the other side of the room, murderer. It was a very tense moment. Prosecutors have got to figure out how to handle this one. Do they say the jury has worked, this is the system, or do they say we have some real concerns about this process?
Okay, we're going to hear from the prosecution in just a couple of minutes, because they are going to hold a news conference and talk to the members of the media. Just to remind you, members of the jury are not going to talk to the press now, at least not in any collective way, and I don't believe the defense team is going to either, and the families may or may not, but for the moment they have disappeared from the courtroom. Cynthia, what do you think, as I said, you had a lot of experience with court TV before you came to us. You've got more experience with live court television. What is the general mood among legal minds out there as to whether cameras should be permitted in the courtroom in the future?
Well, I can tell you, Peter, there's a real division. I mean, on the one side, you have people who say this is a public process, and it's important that the public see this process. If it's working, all the better. If it's not working, and then it's even more important to see the process work. You know, you think of the courtrooms up in New England, the earliest courtrooms, our nation's founders. They were huge, had enormous audience galleries, because the idea was that the public would be present. I mean, the whole notion of public trials is uniquely American in some senses. So there is that tradition, and this technology makes it possible where you can't put your hoe down in the field to actually sit in your living room and watch the process of justice. On the other hand, there are many who say, and I must say I'm among them, that the television camera slowed this trial down. Both sides frequently could be seen playing to the camera, if you will. Now, I'm not sure that that's a big enough burden to take the camera out of the courtroom. I'm not sure that there's not more good than harm, but I think that's the debate that's going to take place across the country. And I can also tell you, Steve Rill, who is the head of Court TV, says that he does have some judges coming to him saying, you know, come to my courtroom, I want to show you how justice really works. But on a whole lot of high-profile cases in the last several months, judges have turned them down, that is, turned the camera down, saying, I don't want a debacle in my courtroom the way I see it been happening in Judge Ito's courtroom. So I think this is going to be discussed very hotly for the next several months.
Okay, Cynthia, thanks so much. We'll let you go to the prosecution press conference now. Mr. Simpson is now going to be taken back to the Los Angeles County Jail, where, from whence he will be released this evening. There's already been some talk among his jailers there about how they spirit him out of there and enabled him to return to something approaching a private life, which is going to be immensely difficult. Peter Aranella talks about the civil suits against him. In the immediate sense, where does he go? Does he go immediately to get his children? Does he go into some kind of in some kind of seclusion to try to get his life together? He's been very active all the time he has actually been in jail. Last night, though, however, if not in anticipation of a verdict that went the other way, but as part of the normal procedure, his cell was actually searched, lest there be in that cell any instrument with which he might commit or attempt to commit suicide had the verdict gone the other way. It's standard procedure, but we do know that he's been talking to the officers who've been with him, all of whom we've told have been very friendly with him, have been very collegial with him during the time he was there, have enjoyed his company, we've heard on several times, has been talking to them in the last several hours about how he might best get away from that place without this enormous monster of the press in Los Angeles and elsewhere hounding him until he is